is a case study. It's really not a case study so much as a system of failures that have happened for quite a while on not just BMW, but a lot of other European make ABS controllers, computers. I've talked to some engineers, and I believe that this is really not BMW's or really even Bosch's fault. Apparently, it stems from the fact that they had to remove the lead from the solder on the circuit boards. I don't know how many of you have heard of ISO 9006. It's a standard for removing the lead from electronic circuitry for a bunch of environmental reasons. They figured out they were poisoning their workers at the factory and putting lead in landfills, all that stuff. In any event, they were leaders of the ISO 9006, and a few years down the road, we started seeing these failures. It's not just BMW. You guys work on Volkswagens or Mercedes or Saabs or any of the European brands that use this technology, you're probably seeing it. This is just a picture of the controller in place, and the backside. Basically, these are solenoids, and they actuate. The actuator part of that is inside a housing on the main valve unit, and when they get actuated, they control ready to flow. What we're going to do is we're going to cover BMW anti-skid stability system controller failures, and what you're going to learn is how to diagnose and repair them. And that's one of the neater cars I get to work with. Obviously, this is just a little reiteration of the same thing. If you work on BMWs, and like I said, Volkswagen, many of these other brands, you're going to see it also. You're going to see these things fail. I use ABS generically, but nowadays all of these cars are either ASC or DSC. And here are all the terms. ABS, pretty much all know that, anti-skid braking system. ASC is automatic stability control, but in BMW jargon, it can also be called all-season traction. It's the same thing. They like their own vocabulary. DSC is dynamic stability control, and let me just say this. ABS, is regular anti-skid braking. ASC came in two flavors from BMW. It comes in the early generation, which limits wheel spin when you're on the gas, but has limited authority, only used for brakes. And then they had ASC plus T for the later all-season traction, which also could close the throttle. And they had a variety of systems for that. That would really stop the car. I had a customer get stuck in a parking lot once on ice because he didn't have the brakes to turn on the switch on the console. He couldn't burn out, As soon as he hit the gas, the wheel started to spin, the computer shut it down, the engine wouldn't go past idle. He was too stupid. Looked down on the console and hit the button. LEW is a lateral acceleration sensor. There are a couple of these sensors, and they come into play in the repair procedure. Basically, they're not used in a basic ABS system. They are used in pretty much most of the ASC systems, all of the DSC systems. LWS is a steering angle sensor. Pretty much all of these cars have that, and I'll get into that in a little bit. GRS is a rotation rate sensor. That's pretty much only in the DSC system. So there are differences here. You don't have to know all of these for some of the systems. You do have to know all of them to the latest. CAN, control area network. John was talking about that networking. CAN is in every car today. And it's a critical part of your diagnosis of these cars, this problem. Combi, in BMW, Combi is a dash cluster. And another part, it acts as, let me just say this, all of these CAN bus cars, not all of these cars use the same components for the end of the CAN bus. The CAN bus has to have both ends to function properly. It doesn't necessarily have to have all the controllers in the middle, but it has to have both terminuses operating. In most of the models, one terminus is the dash cluster. So you can't pull the dash cluster out to diagnose the CAN bus because it kills the bus. Some models use the ABS controller as the other terminus. Some models actually use the steering angle sensor as the terminus. They play with it just to mess with your head. All right, ABS, which can be either ASC or DSC control units, in all models from 96, that's when they started this ISO 9006 stuff, through, I'm only going through 2003 here. Really, we may see some of this in the newer cars, but what I'm going to talk about as far as wheel speed sensors changes after 2003. They're using different types of sensors. So just so you know, if you get into a newer car and you end up with some of these problems, you may still have the problems, but you're not going to be diagnosing wheel speed sensors the same way. All right, symptoms can be related to ABS wheel speed sensors, steering angle sensor, combi, or CAN bus failures. You can get codes in a variety of places. And I said their faults can be stored in other control units on the CAN bus, not just the ABS controller. It's very confusing sometimes. You've got a problem in a different computer and you go to chase that unit because it's got to be there, right? It's not. It's being generated by a problem on the network from a failed ABS controller. This is a screenshot off of an Autologix CAN tool. Actually, it's a car I just had in a couple of weeks ago. This code was in the ABS controller. It was a steering angle sensor code. It had happened 237 times. I say that's pretty real, right? And this other data really isn't so important to you. Actively switched and all of that isn't really so important for this diagnosis. But the bottom line is it happened a lot of times. It was in the ABS computer, and it was not in the steering angle sensor. It was not in the combi. It was not in the airbag module. The airbag looks at steering angle. You're going to have problems.
Question.
Yeah.
What scan tool is that off, in case people want to know?
Autologix. I said that. Yeah, it's the Autologix scan tool, which by the way, I like a lot. Tremendous support with these guys. This is another screenshot from the same thing. Here's one of the telltales. This car was going 384.44 kilometers per hour when the fault occurred. Wow, that's cool. Because if you dropped it out of an airplane, you couldn't do that. And I've seen them at 600 kilometers per hour. Every time I see a wild speed reading on these cars, I'm going for that ABS computer. Because it has freaked out. Something's way wrong there. Okay? Good to look at the data. You don't have to go very far beyond that. Sensors. This is from a BMW training publication. These are two-wire Hall-effect sensors. Now, if you've been to Jerry's training or other training, all Hall-effect sensors are 3 wires, right? I mean, everybody knows that. Not anymore. What BMW did, just to screw with your head, is they run a 2-wire sensor. Now, what they're doing is they're running an 8-volt supply. If you unplug the sensor, which is not the way you normally test it, if you unplug the sensor, you will have 8 volts on this line and nothing here. This ground, that's a ground inside the computer, the ABS computer. What's happening is the sensor is a Hall-effect element, reading in pretty much, well, most of the cases anyway, it's reading off of a metallic contact strip in the seal of the wheel bearings. Sometimes they do it differently. Sometimes you still have a metallic piece. You can put the wheel bearings in backwards and have no ABS. You have to be very careful if you change wheel bearings. In any event, the 8 volts goes through the resistor, through the Hall-effect sensor, which is an on-off device, and then depending on whether it's on or off, it goes into the computer. So there's a square wave there, but look, it's got a resistor to ground. So that's taking some of the power away, since there's limited power available to it, limited current to that resistor, and some of that current's going to ground. The computer is only going to see a different signal, not 8 volts. It's going to switch from 0.75 to 2.5 volts. You should be testing these with an oscilloscope at the control unit with the sensor attached. And you should be seeing 0.75 to 2.5 volts. Square wave, by the way. It's a typical Hall effect, but it's floating and it's got that short range. This is the steering angle sensor, another thing that gets people a little screwed up. The steering angle sensor is a CAN bus device with 1 PID. If you end up on Ernie's scan tool, actually, till the next next software update, and you get a device on your CAN bus which has one PID, you're not reading the DME. You're reading the steering angle sensor. It has been replaced many times by people who get codes for it when it wasn't bad. Actually, very few of these go bad. And so what you're really looking for is scan data on the CAN bus, except for a few cases. I've had a couple of cases where the power or the ground feed to the steering angle sensor have been compromised somehow, usually after an accident. All right, diagnosing these. In ABS, when I say in ABS, what I mean is if you're looking at the ABS computer, the most common fault will be for one bad wheel speed sensor. That's the thing I see most. Not always the same one, though. I would say, statistically, usually the right front. But I've seen any one. And if you swap the sensor side to side, or you put a brand new sensor in, it's still in the same place. It never doesn't move. You should always test wires, especially on a car that's been in an accident. I've had a few where they were pinched in the plastic lining of the wheel well, and they were shorting or otherwise frayed or screwed up. But usually you'll end up with a code that doesn't move, and it's in the computer. CAN codes. That's the next most common thing. Or actually, that's the thing that goes with this. CAN codes. A lot of times, CAN bus codes everywhere. The second most common symptom is the steering angle sensor. You usually get the code in the ABS computer, but believe it or not, you can get steering angle sensor code in the dashboard or in the airbag system, even though it's not faulty and it's being corrupted. The signal data is being corrupted by the ABS computer. If in doubt, easy diagnostic procedure. Clear the code, disconnect the ABS computer, drive the car with it disconnected, see if the codes come back. You won't have any speed information on it. The ABS computers are the collection agency for vehicle speed. They then send it out over the CAN bus to everything else. I had a case a while back where it was an ABS computer, but it came in for a problem of being in fail-safe limp home mode for the automatic transmission. And what it was the speed information from the ABS computer was varying up to 644 kilometers per hour, and the transmission decided it couldn't figure that out anymore. It was confused, and it just shut down. It went into limp home mode. I don't know if it was 644, but it was some Mickey Mouse number like that. The other thing, and I'm glad I wrote it here because I was about to forget to say it, CAN problems may interfere with the airbag system as well. The airbag system is looking at steering wheel inclination especially, but it's also looking at vehicle speed. It's looking at a bunch of parameters to decide not only if it should blow, but how hard it should blow. For example, a driver's airbag won't blow over, I used to think it was 15 degrees, but some engineer at BMW corrected me and said it was like 22 degrees on one car. Once you've turned the steering wheel more than 22 degrees, it thinks you're in enough of a turn where it doesn't want to blow the bag in your face, figuring your head's crooked. You're going to break your neck. So you may not get an airbag blowing, and you may have a problem based on that. As I said before, the problem with these units is in the solder joints. They had to get rid of the lead. They went ISO 9006. This is a big problem now in all electronics, by the way. And some companies have actually gotten exemptions from the requirement to remove the lead, but I don't think that's happened here. And in my opinion, the only proper repair is to replace it with a brand new updated BMW part. There are rebuilders out there. There are some people who've had good luck with them. I don't like the liability. I'm scared by the liability. Somebody is, eating a sandwich, talking on their cell phone, and reading the news, and they crash into a bridge abutment, and somehow I get called into court because I fixed their brake computer. I don't want to be there. Like I said, a lot of people like that stuff. So. All right. Replacement and coating. Repair is relatively simple. I mean, it's a very very simple bolt-on. 6 bolts, 6 Torx head bolts. Sometimes they're a little bit of a bitch to reach, some installations. Before you start, you always want to do, this is true of any electronics, by the way, on BMWs. Changing an airbag, any of this stuff. This is their standard recommendation. Disconnect the battery cables. Connect the cables, not the battery, together with a 10 ohm resistor so that it doesn't snap drain everything, but it does it kind of slowly and drains all the residual juice out of any computers in the car, capacitors and things that store electricity. That way you don't get naps, you know. Don't want to let the smoke out. You replace the control unit. The regular bolt in, no big deal. Now you go through a coding and initialization procedure. You connect the compatible scan tool. I have the AutoLogic. Shop near me has a GT1, which is the factory tool. And there's a pass-through tool that used to be made only by Actia, but now Snap-on has one. There's a few out there. And you have to go to the website for that. By the way, how many guys here go to the factory websites for information or coding or other information? Just a few. You really should use the websites. There's a lot of information there. The manufacturers are required by law to have these websites. If we don't use the websites, they're going to stop providing them eventually. Yes, John?
Granted though, there's no troubleshooting software codes on BMW's website. I know that. It's in their sophisticated diagnostic tool.
Yes, that's correct. With the
So I
pass
paid $35 for nothing.
30.
30.
But whatever, yeah. Actually, all of these websites, I encourage you to use them, but all of these websites have short commas. They don't all have everything. They don't always work all the time. I just had a nightmare last week with a wiring diagram I couldn't pull up. It was I forgot who I was telling, but it was a bad day, for me. I had a relatively simple wiring diagram I wanted to pull up. My disc fell on the floor unbeknownst to me, and I rolled my desk chair over it. So then I pulled up some Motor Magazine wiring diagram, total piece of crap, didn't have anything in it. Then I went on the website and I couldn't read the wiring diagrams. Paid my $30, couldn't get the wiring diagrams to work. Sent them some nasty emails, but didn't fix anything. And in the end, the answer was the other BMW shop a block away and borrowed his disc. But for a wiring diagram. All right. So you connect, by the way, there are aftermarket tools, other tools. BOM has a tool, there are other things. Some of them probably do these things, I just don't know how well or how reliably. So I didn't really list them here. But there are other tools. I don't know if AST's tool really works or BOM's tool. I know they have more capacity than they used to have. So, if you have one of those, you try it. But, I don't know what's there. You connect it, on the earlier cars, you connect it to the 20-pin diagnostic socket under the hood, big round thing like that. Everything from, it depends on the model, but around 2000 on, you go to the OBD2 connector. Basically, if there's no 20-pin connector under the hood, it's OBD2. It's a CAN system, and it's all going through the OBD2 connector, one of the spare pins. You enter a menu item for coding. It's usually 1 or 2 button presses. It'll ask you questions like, are you really sure you want to do this, stupid, and you say yes, and when it's done, the software will tell you to turn off the key for 10 seconds. I've been bitten by this. Don't do just 10 seconds. It may not write to the computer permanently in 10 seconds. I usually wait a minute or two, make a phone call, whatever, just to be sure, take the damn key out of the ignition, throw it on the seat or something. Give it a little time. You exit out of the menu item for coding. You enter the diagnostic software for. Now this is in the AutoLogic. There probably is a little different procedure in the BMW. I think most of them do it automatically. Actually, the things I'm about to do are done almost automatically through the GT1 or the pass-through. But in AutoLogic, you have to do it manually. You go in the software for the actual chassis, you select ABS, and you have to do what are called end-of-line tests. Basically, you're calibrating sensors to the new control unit. If they're not calibrated, it won't recognize that they even exist. And it just won't work. The light will be on, you'll be dead. What I was saying there at the end there, I didn't actually tell you that some of the systems, the early systems, don't have all the sensors. The later systems have every sensor. So first, you always have to do steering angle sensor first. You center the steering wheel on auto logic. It basically gives you a degree readout. You can get it really centered to 0 if you want. And then you say, make it so, and the ABS computer learns that. It now knows what centered is. You have 2 other sensors. They don't always ask you to turn off the ignition between each step, but you should. Don't get stuck with something where it fails to remember what you calibrated. You calibrated it, you didn't turn off the key, the computer never wrote it to memory, and it doesn't know you did it. So between each step, I like to turn off the key, don't wait for 10 seconds, wait a minute or 2, turn the key back on, go to the next step. The 2 other sensors are that rotation rate sensor and the lateral acceleration sensor. There have been cases where you have to do them in reverse order. This first happened actually the other shop that's a block away from me, Graham Lawson, Bimmers Only. He had a car, he couldn't get the damn initialization to happen. He couldn't get these sensors to be recognized. He brought it to me, he said, well, maybe the auto logic will do it. He has a GT1. Maybe the auto logic will do it. I did it. I couldn't get it to happen. And I realized that it froze up a couple of times when I was doing the first sensor, which I believe in this case was in this order, the lateral acceleration sensor. So I skipped it. I went to the next sensor, and that one took. So I said, okay, well, let's try the other one again. That was the answer. So, if you have a car that won't initialize the sensors, got nothing to lose, reverse them. Anyway, you got to throw them out. You got to wait a while to let it write to the computer to make sure the stupid thing recognized it. Back out of all the menus and clear any trouble code. Now, they say to clear the trouble code in the DSC computer, but there are codes in other computers a lot of times that are related. Sometimes they're not related, but it's a good idea just to be sure. Clear everything in the damn car. I mean, obviously, if you had drivability problems or whatever, you should have diagnosed them first, or at least written down the codes. Bottom line, get rid of all your codes so they don't come back and bite you. Test drive the car. You should always test drive the car just in case there's some other bugaboo going on. There have been a couple of cases where there was still a bad wheel speed sensor. That's, playing with your head. Come back to the shop, scan it again, make sure there are no DTCs, and if there aren't any, that's it. Any questions?